Simply look at American history. 1776, the Revolutionary War. 1864, the Civil War. 1945, one saeculum later, the end of World War II. These wars were resets. They were the results of crisis moments that had played out in the decade prior. The supercycle is turning. We are at that crisis moment once again. In order to really identify the coming black swan, we need to put on the correct lens from which to view the world.
As humans, we've actually been through this pattern many times before. The only difference is the appearance of the outer threat. The inner threat is always that we will go into a fear mode, change our biochemistry, demolish our creativity, and convince ourselves that we are powerless. Think about it. All that has likely happened in your life since the coronavirus outbreak is that you and your family have watched mainstream or alternative media telling you what's happening out there. All of it sounds convincing enough, and every human around you is mirroring the same believed reality. Therefore, everyone is responding in a predictable fashion. Even conspiracy theories emerging in times like these is completely predictable. And prediction is the name of the game. Old paradigm views of an elite conspiracy had more to do with people, bloodlines, and prophecies. The conspiracy of tomorrow is centered around the use of technology. Therefore, today, the conspiracy is the infiltration of human perception with the use of technology and algorithms. I bet you think you have access to the internet, don't you? I did. But the largest search engine, Google, currently indexes only 0.004% of the internet. Whistleblower Brittany Kaiser gave examples of how social media platforms like Facebook target extroverts with empowering activism ads, while introverts are targeted with paranoia pieces or contrived conspiracies, all to support a deeper agenda. This is where I had to stop and look at the nature of the content coming into my feeds. This shows that a certain amount of conspiracy is not only allowed, but it's predicted, hijacked, fabricated, and advertised to people, I guess, like me. This is calling for a more evolved approach to the solution, and maybe it's not about complex information anymore. If it becomes increasingly difficult to parse through so much contradictory information and reconcile real news from fake news, then take a tip from Paul Chek and realize that the situation is calling you to develop your discernment, not blindly accept whichever has more bells and whistles. In order to really know how to proceed, we must deviate from being given our next chess move by the screens in our house and begin to evolve our consciousness rapidly in the coming weeks and months. This is not done by reading more articles, listening to more videos, or entertaining any more external ideas. It's done by climbing the ladder to see why the anthill has gone mad. From a higher perspective, it's easy to see that the coming tech revolution will harness the power of evolutionary history in a relative blink of an eye.
There have been 4 major historical eras defined by the way we work. The hunter-gatherer age lasted several million years. And then the agricultural age lasted several thousand years. The industrial age lasted a couple of centuries. And now the information age has lasted just a few decades. And now today, we're on the cusp of our next great era as a species. Welcome to the Augmented Age. How many of you are augmented cyborgs? I would actually argue that we're already augmented. Imagine you're at a party and somebody asks you a question that you don't know the answer to. If you have one of these, in a few seconds, you can know the answer. We've always been limited by this need to manually push our wills into our tools, like literally using our hands, even with computers. I want to have a conversation with a computer, right? I want to say, computer, let's design a car. To come up with new designs all by themselves. All it needs are your goals and your constraints. I'll give you an example. In the case of this aerial drone chassis, all you would need to do is tell it something like it has 4 propellers, you want it to be as lightweight as possible, and you need it to be aerodynamically efficient. And the computer is coming up with this stuff all by itself. No one ever drew anything, and it started completely from scratch. And by the way, it's no accident that the drone body looks just like the pelvis of a flying squirrel. It's because the algorithms are designed to work the same way that evolution does.
So if supercomputers are sifting through billions of years of evolution to arrive back at the same anatomy of creatures that have been here for a long time, then what does that say about us and our bodies? There seems to be so much fascination about our technology that we forget we still don't understand the human body or its potential. People like Wim Hof dealt with ridicule their entire lives until scientists finally proved that his breath practices allow people to override their own nervous systems. Over 100 years ago, Santiago Cajal studied neurons and was curious about glia, which make up the majority of brain matter. But his brother, Pedro, raced to finalize the neuron doctrine, which gave all intelligence credit to neurons. Science passed off glia as packing material, unimportant. Dr. Andrew Kobe now says that neurons may be involved perhaps solely in reflexive or pre-programmed behavior, while astrocyte glia could be the mechanism for higher-order thought processing, namely imagination, creativity, and intuition. To carry this thought forward, glia runs through the entire body with a fiber optic quality and is our most interconnected thinking apparatus in the body. The fascia, or connective tissue, is a liquid crystalline network that connects to every organ, every kind of tissue, and can transport photon units of information. This is how you can respond to a touch of your toe before your brain even receives the signal. The nervous system works at about 250 miles an hour, whereas the fascia communicates at near light speed with a fractal distribution system. This tissue is made up of collagen, ground substance, and water. It's healthiest when it's moved in dynamic ways, well hydrated, and rested. Today, sitting is the predominant human activity. Less movement, poorly hydrated, and hardly rested. That's the state of our bodies. 5G radiation is said to be absorbed most in the epidermis and dermis layers of the skin. This is a part of our fascial system, and it communicates through photons. But while we marvel at technology doing this, our body has its own fiber optic system. It's perfectly built, like Buckminster Fuller's tensegrity model. It can withstand and adapt to many kinds of stressors and forces. Cullen Smith and Santos Bonacci focus on the symbolism of the human anatomy. The pelvis of a human is centered around the sacrum bone. The root of the word denotes sacred. The root of our spine with 33 vertebrae that finishes at the cranium. The cranial sacral pathway houses cerebrospinal fluid that transports chemicals like serotonin, norepinephrine, and DMT. The ability for a human to give life through sexual intercourse is partly due to the cerebrospinal fluid that was once bathing the brain of the father. This fluid travels down the spine, past all the innervated organs, likely picking up information from the entire body, and moves into the mother. The ancients called this the sacred secret, or the sacral secretion. In the old world, this was the only way to give rise to new life. Today, we are taking part in a massive incantation to birth something altogether new. How? By letting technology hang out and study us. Everything you do on your devices is specifically designed to mimic and learn from our behavior.
Deep learning has been used to translate from one language to another, and you're going to start seeing this in Google Translate. This is expanding the computer's ability to understand and generate natural language. With supervised learning, the computer needs to be taken by the hand, and humans have to tell the computer the answer to many questions. For example, on millions and millions of images, humans have to tell the machine, well, for this image, it is a cat. For this image, it is a dog. For this image, it is a laptop. For this image, it is a keyboard. This is very painful, and we use crowdsourcing to manage to do that.
Now, if you want to know who is feeding these computers the bulk of their information, just look at all these websites that ask you to perform something a hacker bot wouldn't be able to figure out. It was barely about your security. It was always about teaching the Internet of Things how we think and discern reality. All technology has been built in our likeness, and the Internet itself is the beginning of it adopting our behavior. If AI can behave like an organism, does it matter how we classify it? If it can outthink the smartest humans, perform and outlive any human, learn exponentially, communicate telepathically with 5G precision, then they're kind of like gods, or transformers. And the only thing that would initially keep them from discovering their true oneness is with firewalls between Amazon, Alibaba, and every databank in order to become a singular AI organism.
There's a speeding up of information processing technology and a cultural reliance upon it beyond which we can't actually foresee the level of change that can come over our society. It's like, an event horizon past which we can't see. Now imagine having computers that are superhuman at every task that is relevant, every intellectual task, right? So the best physicist is a computer. The best medical diagnostician is a computer. The best prover of math theorems is a computer. The best engineer is a computer, right? There's no reason why we're not headed there.
We've all heard about this in movies, but most of us likely don't see how close it actually is. Perhaps that's why all the mainstream media is telling us we're going to have to adopt a new normal. There have been 27 million job losses in the US alone in just a few months. One could say we're already being groomed to accept the new normal. And this scare of the global virus might be a litmus test to let our devices study us through the largest social experiment in history. It could also be a way to introduce new economic and life-fulfilling concepts in the minds of the masses.
Okay. What to do about mass unemployment? This is going to be a massive social challenge. And I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income.
There is the possibility of providing a minimum income. The question, what will that do, is completely unanswerable. We have no idea what it'll do. See, I think of human beings as pack animals fundamentally, this is just, it's a metaphor in some sense. I don't think that people can be happy unless they are burdened down with something, like a sled dog is burdened down with something. You have to have responsibilities. They have to be important responsibilities. You have to be sequenced in your time. Most of the people I have in my clinical practice, if they're not employed, they just fall apart.
A few months ago, most people would call you a doomsday preacher if you talked about a global pandemic coming that will lay off millions and transfer trillions of dollars of wealth. More so if you said the pandemic might be only a cover story for the funneling of more power and more resources into fewer hands.
The great devaluation coming in the 2020s will witness the largest transfer of wealth in human history. Currencies will be devalued. This devaluation will cause a collapse. Government actions and regulations will be taken to defend against the depression.
Before the BP oil rig explosion on April 20, 2010, CEO Tony Hayward sold off 1/3 of his stock, avoiding a massive loss. Just prior to the coronavirus economy hit, the largest historical exodus of 1,332 CEOs took place. How is it that the super wealthy always seem ahead of the curve on stock market cycles that seem completely random to the majority? Well, have you ever seen what all the data you've produced looks like? What about the data of entire populations? The world?